Hey everybody, Jess Sherman here. There are two foods that stir up so much controversy when it comes to our kids and to their behavior, and I want to address these head on. They are gluten, which is not a food in and of itself actually. It's a protein found in grains and found in a lot of additives. And the second one is sugar. Also not a food in and of itself, but a component of food that we also find everywhere. And you will hear people throw around research studies and opinions and anecdotes and lots of ideas that both support and refute the impact of sugar and of gluten on behavior. And you'll encounter lots of people who brush them off as unimportant. And you might still be a person who thinks it's unimportant, in which case you really need to stick around because we have a lot to talk about. And you will definitely find people, if you choose to take sugar and gluten out of your child's diet, you will find people who think that you are depriving your kids of a happy childhood because you're not giving them these things. Now, in my coaching program, I help families take gluten and sugar out of their diets, along with a few other key foods. Why do I do that? Why do I do that when there is conflicting research and controversy about these two things? I do it because in order to help our kids, we need to nourish them. Raising resilience is all about relieving their stress and nourishing their bodies. That's what we do here. And gluten and sugar are triggers for stress, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. And they're not nourishing. So they got to go. It's as simple as that. Now, let's just sort of get into a little bit of the nitty-gritty about why I pick on gluten and why I pick on sugar. When you take out gluten grains, you do a few other things, a few really important things. So this isn't about being celiac. It's actually not even about being gluten sensitive. This is about why it causes stress and is not nourishing, okay? When you take gluten grains out, you relieve a lot of stress on the digestive system because gluten is very hard to digest. It's very hard to pull apart. And a lot of our kids, when they struggle with behavior issues, they also have stuff going on in the gut. You actually change the microbiome when you take out gluten. And the microbiome is that consortium of yeast and bacteria, all the microbes that are living in our gut. And one of the things we talk about a lot here is when we can influence the gut, we also influence the brain because they're talking to each other. So when you take out gluten, you relieve a lot of stress on the digestive system and you start to change the microbiome in a positive direction. When you take out gluten, you influence blood sugar. For two different reasons. One is that you take out a large source of refined carbohydrates, these high glycemic carbohydrates like pasta and bagels and things made with white refined flour. And a lot of our kids who are struggling with behavior issues have very sensitive blood sugar. So this can actually help a lot just by taking gluten out, and because of its effect on blood sugar, can really help. There's actually been some study done on how taking out gluten can prevent the onset of and reverse diabetes. So from a blood sugar standpoint, taking out gluten is very helpful. When you take out gluten, you also take out a source of an amino acid called glutamate. And glutamate, when it builds up in kids, which it does in some kids, not all kids, but when it builds up in kids, it can act as an excitatory neurotransmitter, meaning it keeps kids in that hyper aroused state and prevents them from calming down, right? So when you reduce the gluten grains, you take out a large source of glutamate, and a lot of kids react really well to that. When you take out gluten, this is the last one I'm going to talk about, it's also really important, you take out a really large source of synthetic folic acid. And because in our country, our gluten grains are by law fortified with synthetic folic acid. And with some kids, a lot of kids who have behavior issues, their genetics are such that they can't use that synthetic folic acid. It actually blocks their ability to uptake the healthy folate that they're getting in their other whole foods. So they become deficient in folate. And so we need to take out that folic acid so that we can relieve that blockage and they can uptake the healthy folate and that's usable for them. That's really important for a lot of reasons that I'm not going to get into here, but that's really important as well. So even if your child is not celiac, meaning they have an autoimmune disease that is triggered by gluten, we still see improvements when we take gluten out and we replace it with other whole food options, because it's part of a bigger picture that has to do with an overall stress load on the body. You see how that works? We have to reduce that stress if we want to raise resilience. That's why we take out gluten. So and the same goes for sugar, right? So sugar stresses out the nervous system. Sugar interferes with our gut bacteria as well and stresses out the digestive system. Sugar interferes with the absorption of certain nutrients, and it actually leaches certain nutrients out of the body. So a child on a very high sugar diet can become nutrient deficient, not just because they're not eating whole foods because they're eating too much sugar, but also because that sugar is actively leaching nutrients out of their body. So sugar and gluten are part of a general picture of stress and malnourishment. And when we raise resilience, we want to do the opposite. We want to reduce stress and improve nourishment. So this is why we take them out. Your child doesn't have room for that stress right now. And they need deep nourishment. So yes, you have to do this safely, and when you take something out of the diet, you have to make sure that you're going to replace it with something healthy, and you're not going to induce nutritional deficiencies. That's really, really important. But the important thing I want you to know, what I really want you to take away from this post, is that the reason that I have you take out certain foods like gluten and sugar is not because some study somewhere said that this is going to solve your problems. Right? That sugar causes hyperactivity, or gluten causes autism, or your child's not going to have ADHD anymore if you take out the sugar or the additives or whatever it might be, right? I find it laughable to think that we'll ever find a study that will show that by implementing one strategy with one food, with something so complex and multifaceted as a child and how they're behaving, that you're going to solve the problem. It's not one thing, right? But we have enough research to show us that certain foods, gluten and sugar are among them, can contribute a significant amount of stress on the body and can interfere with nourishment enough to exacerbate all kinds of symptoms, from mood and behavior disorders to skin rashes and constipation. So we have enough research to go on to make that a viable starting point. That's why we take them out. So there's so much more to this puzzle of how food is influencing your kids and how you can use it strategically. You can learn lots more on my blog at jesssherman.com if you're not there already. And we will go as deep into this as you want to go. Take good care.